Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Ought to Know webinar series from Autism Awareness Australia. My name is Nicole Rogerson. I'm the CEO of Autism Awareness Australia. I just want to say this before we kick off, a very big thank you to our supporters at Leap In who, due to their support, made this webinar possible today. Leap In is Australia's leading NDIS plan manager, supporting thousands of Australians, certainly driven by the belief that if they help people with disability and their families get the most out of their NDIS packages. Very focused on that. So do visit our friends at Leap In and have a look at the services that they offer. Okay, welcome everybody and welcome to my colleague Karen McKinnon. Thank you, Karen, for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Karen is a psychologist with the Autism Partnership. She has more than 3 decades experience. That feels like I should lie about that, Karen, and just, you're not old enough to have 3 decades of experience. So I'll just change your bio as we go. But very, very focused your career on early intervention for children with autism, and certainly the work you have done over that time. I've known you for many years. So it is absolutely a delight to have you here to talk about sleep. So I would assume that if for the people who have registered for our webinar today are somewhat tired
Yes.
this webinar. So luckily enough, we're recording it. So should they have a little nap in the middle of this, they can go back and watch it a little bit later and we'll make it available.
Yeah.
So Karen, are sleep concerns a common challenge for children with autism in the early years? Because that's what we're going to focus on, even though some of the principles, I guess, what we're going to talk today aren't just about children 0 to 6, but I think that's a lot of our audience are going to be parents of very little ones. Is sleep a common problem?
It really is, unfortunately. And I also want to acknowledge that sleep is really elusive, probably for everybody that's joined us today, and me too, actually, last night. So the irony of this is very present for me. But yes, it is really common. So it's not diagnostically part of autism, but it certainly co-occurs, in most children, actually. Lots of families will report it, and different types of sleep patterns, but it's very, very common.
So, but how does it differ for children with autism rather than children who don't have autism?
Yeah, some things are the same. And also, particularly if we're talking about young children, because sleep can be a little bit up and down for young children anyway. So, some of the different things that happen, the sleep patterns or the concerns around sleep are the same in children who are typically developing and autistic children. The thing that adds a layer of complexity really is some of those differences for autistic kids. So things like the sensory experience or the tendency towards sort of forming rules and patterns really quickly, that can amplify some of those sleep concerns.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. And what about some of the myths or misconceptions around autism and sleep? Because is that might confuse the message here a little bit too.
Yeah, but I think the one thing that I see most with families is a feeling that you can't change it and you need to accept it. And that's really a driving force for me in the work that I do, is understanding that you can change sleep patterns. So that's the biggest misconception, is that you just have to deal with it and you need to accept that it's just part of life. The other thing is that there's only one way to sleep. So we know that in different cultures, there are different, ways that people sleep. There's co-sleeping in some cultures. Other cultures, there's very sort of rigid rules around sleep and when it happens and how it happens. So I think the misconceptions are there's only one way to do it, and also that you can't change it if it's not, if a child's not having a sound sleep overnight.
Because if it's having, sleep can have an effect just on the child, but can have an effect on the whole family, really, can't it?
It really can, and there are these knock-on effects. And I think I was thinking about it this morning and thinking about often sleep can feel like the hardest thing to change, because the time you have to work on it is when you're the most exhausted and when your family is the most exhausted, right at the end of the day. So it's really, really challenging to figure out what to do. But there are strategies that you can put in place that really turn that around.
All right, well, let's go into maybe some of it, because sleep, there are different issues in sleep. So let's look at the first particular profile, which is that for parents of kids who struggle to get their child to fall asleep. The bedtime's really late, child doesn't want to go to sleep, can't go to sleep, those kind of late at nighters. That's one particular profile. How can parents address a child that's displaying that?
Yeah, the first thing is to really understand it. So, what we know when we're looking at sleep is there are sort of rules and routines and patterns that develop that a child learns that they feel like they need around sleep. And then there's the physical or physiological aspects. So, we need to understand those things to really get a sense of what is the actual issue here and what is the thing that we need to adjust or tweak a little bit. So, I come from a sort of a science background, so I'll always look at what's the data tell us and what are the patterns that we see. So the first thing I'd be looking at is what time does the child usually fall asleep each night and just documenting that. For those of you who love data, go for a spreadsheet. For those of you who don't, write it on your phone, like and anything in between. But I think finding the patterns is the first part. The second part is really what helps sleep and what hinders sleep. So each night when you're putting your child to bed, what did we do that really facilitated going to bed well and what got in the way of that? So that could be, the TV was on and there was a dance party, or we had friends over, or they ate this food, or they didn't eat enough. Like there are all of these things that either make it better or make it worse. So I think the first thing is looking for the patterns, particularly for those kids that are going to bed at sort of 11 o'clock. The other thing is naps during the day for those really young kids. Is a late afternoon nap helpful to sleep overnight, or is that actually hinder sleep overnight? So try to gather all the information and the data together. And then my main tip for those kids that sleep late is not if it's an 11 o'clock bedtime, I wouldn't be aiming for an 8 o'clock bedtime. I would inch it back. So your goal to start with is if it's 11 o'clock that your child falls asleep, we're aiming for 10:45 and then for 10:30, and then we inch it back over time. So that seems to be the best strategy to get back down towards a reasonable bedtime, because putting a child to bed when they're just not tired at all really doesn't help the child associate going to bed and then falling asleep.
Yeah, right. And is there a perfect bedtime? I mean, I guess it changes. I mean, for some parents, it's because it would be nice to have a few hours to yourself. But is there a perfect time?
Yeah, but it's more the amount of sleep each night is, developmentally, there are guidelines for that. I tend to think of sleep in a week block because you're going to have shorter sleeps and longer sleeps, but as long as you're kind of getting the average over a week, that's okay. But culturally, there are families that like their kids to go to bed and parents go to bed earlier, and there are cultures where dinner is, 8 or 9 o'clock, so you're going to bed a little bit later. So I'd look at the total amount of sleep over a 24-hour period and then also over the week, and that's really the main marker.
Okay. Can bedtime routines help with any of this? What's sort of a realistic, or I don't know, is there an autism friendly routine here that would work?
Yeah, I think what's autism friendly is probably good habits for any children, actually. And there's a lot of research, but also we know from a lot of families that that routine in the evenings really facilitates sleep. So there are a couple of things that I'm thinking about with that. One is um, that bed is for sleep and not play. So really establishing that you put your child to bed when they're sort of dozy and ready for sleep. And if they're not ready yet, but you want some wind down time, do that outside of bed. So that could be like on a little fold out couch next to the bed. I know there's lots of things about parents just wanting to have their kids in their bedroom and settled because they've got to do other things and clean up from dishes and dinner and everything. But the idea of bed is for sleep and bed's not where you spend lots and lots of time playing is a really, really important part of the routine. So pop your child into bed when they're dozy and you think that they're probably going to fall asleep within the next sort of 15 to 30 minutes. The other thing is sleep associations, and we all have these. We have things that we do. It could be lighting or noise, or it could be, having a shower, or these sort of things that we do, activities that we do in order before sleep. Those things get your body ready for sleep and they really build the signals that sleep is coming. So I think go to bed when you're dozy, or have your child go to bed when they're a bit sleepy. Have the whole evening after dinner be establishing these little routines and sort of wind down activities and building these associations, because it's a couple of hours of getting your body ready so that you're relaxed and can go to sleep when you go to bed.
And I assume that's like getting that routine and then being reasonably consistent about it every night. Is that kind
That's
of
right.
routine?
Yeah, and that, that is in a lot of ways that really suits an autistic child because they do like that consistency and routine anyway. So that works in our favor here. But it's so important. Those things, they signal your brain that you're getting ready for sleep. And then when you go to bed at the right time, it's like, oh, I know this. My head hits the pillow, and then I'm lights out after that.
Okay.
Um,
Can I ask then, inevitably the question will be from some parents is what does the role screens play here? Is screens our friend here or working against us?
Yeah, I'm going through a revolution in my thoughts about that. So I had really been thinking about all of the literature and all of the articles published about blue screens and how harmful they are. And it turns out last year there was some new research that was published that sort of indicates that it's not necessarily time on blue screens that is the thing that messes up sleep. The literature actually showed that if you watching screens before bed, it's only 9 minutes less sleep that you get, actually. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal. It tends to be more about the child's temperament. So if your child is more of a sort of dopamine seeking, really, really wants that iPad time and has a hard time coming off the iPad and gets a bit upset or frustrated about that, that can be challenging. So I think I'd think of it as, does the iPad help or hinder sleep? But I don't think you need to rule it out. And I honestly see so many families that really need that screen time to be there so that the family can function. So I don't think it's the bad guy that everybody has been talking about. It obviously, limits and places that we do it, but we have to be reasonable with what we expect here. And if you're juggling bedtime for three young children, using screen time, if your child can give it up easily, I think is okay.
Okay. All right. Good to know. All right. Now let's go on to a different type of profile. Let's talk about the middle of the night wakers. Those that get into bed okay and off to sleep okay, and everything seems fantastic, but 3 a.m., bolt upright, ready for a party, or certainly ready to come and seek out their parents. How do parents manage that? Because that's just exhausting and can be, fairly disruptive to the whole family, I take it.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part, actually. I think the going to bed and what time is, manageable for many families, but this being awake for hours and hours when the rest of the family is sleeping is really, really challenging, particularly because some kids like to be up and moving around and accessing like going to the fridge and grabbing food and all of those things. So I really acknowledge that this is very hard and it's taxing. So obviously your child is not getting enough sleep, but you're up too. And so you're getting into the next day without the sleep that you need as well. So again, I'd go back to bed is for sleep. And it feels a bit counterintuitive to be saying, get your child out of bed if they're awake. But I really do think if they're up anyway. So go and do something else. Wait for that natural sort of, sleepiness to come and then go back to bed from there. That's one of the things that we could do. The other thing is think about what your child is accessing in that time. So if they're waking up in the night and they're getting the iPad and they're having a snack and there's lots of cuddles and we're singing songs and there's all these beautiful, lovely preferred things, your child may be thinking, well, when I wake up, I get to do all of these. Disneyland is here. So maybe can we do sort of, maybe more low key activities overnight, and then those other beautiful, fun things are for during the daytime. Again, acknowledging that that can be really hard because sometimes kids will protest about that and that wakes up the baby and all of those things. So we have to be pretty practical about it. Um, but I think it's just if your child's not sleeping, hop out of bed, think about the activities they do. Maybe they can be a little bit more low key. Go back to bed when it looks like they're sleepy. And then the sort of most important thing to work on as a skill is that your child learns to resettle themselves overnight rather than needing you to do that. But that needs hours and hours of talking through about, what are their sleep associations. So for kids who fall asleep with mum or dad holding them or mum or dad cuddling them, they may need that through the night to be able to settle themselves back to sleep. So that's a big thing for us to kind of figure out, but definitely a consideration.
Yeah, I have a family in my street who have a little boy that fits into this situation, and he's 4 or 5, his sister's 2. It's almost unfortunately like the little toddlers learnt the same behavior, so it is party at 3 in the morning,
Yeah.
and the parents, and then is that a problem? What do you do if they're awake, they're not going back to sleep, or they do around 8 a.m. or something when the family's really got to go and everybody's got to get out the door? I mean, I know with this neighbor of mine, they're tempted to let him sleep at that time because he's
Mm.
exhausted, but is that the wrong thing to do?
It's really, really hard. So, I think ultimately the best thing to do is to go to bed at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every day. And even if you've had a rough sleep, to still stick to that pattern. But it's really hard to wake a child who's just gone back to sleep. So I think, and parents will say, of the 10 things you've given me, that is the one thing that I will not do. So we have to be a bit reasonable about the expectations of that. But certainly, if you can have a pattern where it's the same wake up time every day over many, many nights in a row, you'll see that pattern shift over time. But it's hard. You're navigating a lot of things. And the last thing you think of doing when you've had a rough night's sleep is waking your child up so that waking them up and having them be upset about being woken up. So we've got to be a little bit practical about it.
Yeah, okay. What about the children where it might not be the 3 a.m. thing, but it is very early? I think, 4:35. It's like it's early, but it's sort of the family get into that time frame, which is we're up early. I think one of my staff members here, Nick, I remember when I first met her, her whole family were just very early risers because her
Hmm.
son started that process. Um, is that just something families have to learn to live with?
I mean, that's one option is it's like, oh, it's 5 o'clock and that's his natural waking time. So let's just get up then and do some low key things until the rest of the family wakes up. Sometimes, the strategy for sleep is to do nothing at all. And if it's functional and it's working for your family, that might be the path that you take. It could be that there are other things that you can do around that. So I think naps, again, for those really young kids, if your child is having a 2 or 3 hour nap during the day, let's say they're a 3-year-old, they could be getting enough sleep from that and an early wake that they actually don't need more sleep than that. So they will keep waking up early. So is it time to fade that nap out? Um, there are strategies too where the child wakes early, but you can give yourself a window of like an hour or something where the child learns just to entertain themselves safely. So for those kids who can do that, it can be, well, you can get up, but we play here so that we don't, disturb the house. There are other things like there's little clocks that start glowing when it's time to get out of bed. So you can teach kids to look for those signals like a sun comes up or a sound comes on. But it just depends what your child understands as well.
Yeah, okay. And I love that idea of like the visual. I do distinctly remember a family that taught their child to sleep in until 6, and they were really excited that the child had learned that you stay in bed until 6 in the morning. And then somebody asked them, "Why didn't you just make it 7?" So, what are some of the other general strategies that can help change these sleep patterns? Because oftentimes parents are a little bit trapped and exhausted because this has been going on for a while, right?
Mhm.
What are some of the things you can do to start changing some of those patterns?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different strategies. The first thing I would consider is the strategy needs to suit the family. So if a professional comes in and says, this is what you've got to do, but it's not in the family's sort of natural instincts to do that, that's not going to work. So there are families, if we think of a spectrum from I really want to go gently and I'm worried about upsetting my child, or I'm not sure I want to work on this, to like, I got to get this done. Like I'm just going to do it. Just tell me what to do and I want to fix it today. And then there's everything in between. So the strategy needs to really match that. One strategy is don't deal with it yet. And I think that's a valid strategy. One of the things that I think about sleep is you have to be ready. You have to be mentally ready, emotionally ready, and you have to have sleep yourself to be able to work on sleep for one of your children. So one thing could be, we're not going to change it yet. We're going to let our child co-sleep or sleep the way that they want to, and we'll figure it out when we've got the, mental reserves to do that. But then I think we're working between this gentle, small, little steps versus a I want to do it all in 1 week, tell me what to do, and everything in between.
And presumably, if you've had a child that was really used to co-sleeping and you decide you're over it because they're getting bigger, etc., it's not something that is going to happen in one night. They're not just going to say, "Oh, well, it was great sleeping with my parents, and now I'm on my own."
Yeah,
Existing.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I think there's some planning that needs to happen with that. And I have a story. It's from probably 30 years ago. But there was a family I worked with and their little girl, she would go to bed in her own bed, but she would come and start to snuggle with them overnight. And she was getting to the point, I think she was sort of 9 or 10 years old, and they're like, okay, I think it's time for her to sleep in her own bed overnight. Um, both parents took annual leave at the same time. They mapped out the plan. They slept in shifts. And then they started to, it's like the first night she comes, we're going to just very gently guide her back to her bed. And they did that for the first 3 nights. The amount of times that she got out of bed, they tracked it on a little golf counter. The first night was 87 times she got out of bed. The second night was over 100 times. The third night was three. And after that, it was zero. And it was just this lovely story of their commitment to that, their support of each other, and also that they had the right strategy and they knew those strategies were going to work for them. The only time that went backwards was when the little girl got sick and they wanted to bring her back into bed and they just needed to comfort her. Only took a night to get that back on track.
I love the other part of that story that you tell is that they took some data,
Yeah.
like with a golf clicker or well, it doesn't matter what it happens to be. You know, your phone's got a million different ways you could do that now, but it's like it does help parents see that they're going in a direction. Because if you've walked your child back 87 times or 60 times, it still feels like a lot of times, and you might not see the improvement.
That's exactly right. That data can motivate you so much. And I did that with my two babies. I took breastfeeding data, like I took all of the data because I needed something to motivate me to keep going. And when I could see that those numbers go down, I'm like, okay, doesn't feel like it's working, but it actually is working.
Yeah. Okay. Now, at what point does it get to the stage where families might need to seek professional help? Like they've tried. I'm sure there's lots of parents that are watching this that are going, "I've tried everything, nothing works.
Yeah.
This child does not seem to need to sleep." When do you bring in a professional, and what type of professional?
Yeah, and I think families do wait until they're at rock bottom. And that's probably because it's really, like I was saying, it's very hard to change because you're desperately tired at the time that you need to do a bit of work on that. So I often see that families will wait until they're in crisis before getting some strategies in place. I think it would be nice to do it a little earlier to try and avoid you getting to rock bottom. So that would be one thing to consider. But I think if it's persistent in young children, if it's been about 6 months and you're really not seeing any changes, that means that it's a pattern of sleeping, not just a sort of developmental change. So I think if it's been 6 months, I'd be looking at some support. Or if it's shorter than that, but it's really impactful. So if your whole house isn't sleeping, or if you're, just surviving, but certainly not thriving, or it has those knock-on effects, I would jump in early and get that support. My main thoughts about who does it is they need to really know and understand autistic children, and developmental, patterns and typical development. And they need to have a good understanding of sleep and the things that work and don't work in sleep. So that could be a psychologist, it could be a behavior consultant, it could be an OT. There's lots of different people who will be able to have input, but they really need to know autism and they really need to know sleep.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, some people are going to ask, is there a role for medication in this? I mean, we've just talked about strategies that are behavioral strategies that parents can do, but is medication ever a fit, and particularly in these young years?
Yeah, again, it's probably parent preference, and some parents will be, I will do anything, just tell me all the things I can do, and others will be, we want to take a low intrusive approach to this. So I think just acknowledging that that's okay either way that you go. The research is a little bit all over the place too. So one of the things that's often given is melatonin.
Yep, yep.
There is some research around that. What we know about it though is that it helps you fall asleep, but it doesn't help you stay asleep. So it's really only helpful for that going to bed and getting to sleep initially. And so some families will use that. I feel a little bit on the fence about it. I certainly think if you're in crisis and you need that for functioning, or if your child is, really desperately needing sleep, there is a place for it. But I do know that we can work on sleep without that too. So I think just go with your preference and sort of what your level of need is in that moment, and make those decisions yourself in line with a GP or a pediatrician.
Yeah, okay. Making sure you've got that external expert advice as well.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Now, parents, you've sort of referenced a few times today, it's that parents are often exhausted themselves. And I love that you use that family as an example, that they agreed to take annual leave together and they agreed to work on it. And there was a whole plan in place. Like, we just know that works so well when families can do that. Um, but but when it has all gone a bit far and the parents are exhausted and this is taking longer, what are some things parents can do to take care of themselves?
Hmm. There's a few things, and maybe the first one is I'd put your own sleep first, because I think if you're not in the right frame of mind, you'll never get sleep sorted for your kids because you just don't have the mental capacity to do that and to follow through on the things that you need to do. So I think, be in the right state of mind when you feel like you're going to work on a strategy, and just don't work on it yet if you're not ready to do that. Share the load if you can. Obviously, there are a lot of single parents that aren't able to do that. So then I think it's about planning intentionally and getting ready for that sort of preparing yourself for doing something about sleep. It was like, I need these things to be in place for this to be successful. I need to take some time off work, or I need this and that to happen for this to go well. So I'm just going to wait until all my ducks are in a row and I can do that then. And I don't feel bad about that. I don't think there's a desperation in the need to change sleep. If you don't do it for a month, it'll still be there, and it won't necessarily be worse. So just take the time to get yourself ready for that. The other thing I think about is when you start to work on sleep, you can paint this story in your head of like, it's going to be better in 3 nights, and he's going to sleep through the night and sleep through the night every night. And I think having a smaller little mini definition of success of like, this week, he slept through 2 out of 7 nights. If we can get 3 out of 7 nights, that's a win, because we're working towards better overall sleep over time. And we just don't see those miraculous changes very often. The chipping away is the thing that really makes the biggest difference. So I think have a reasonable definition of success so you don't get disappointed and give up. And I think in terms of taking care of yourself, that comes in a lot of different forms. So some people it's exercise, some people it's downtime and watching TV, some people it's a sweet treat, some people it's taking a nap during the day. Like, whatever is your form, I think prioritizing your own sleep, but doing the things that make you feel good and feel ready to tackle sleep when you can.
Okay, some of the other things that might get in the way of that is the fact that even when you're trying to work on these routines, life gets in the way, right? Siblings can have different expectations about what their bedtime is. There's challenges at work, there's unexpected things come up. I mean, is it really, as you said earlier, carve out that time, try and find a time that you think will be the least disruptive to do something like this? Like, you might not choose Christmas or something.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's carve out the time and then have an expectation that it's going to feel like this. It'll get better and then it'll get worse, because there'll be school camp, or there'll be sibling is sick, or mum's away for a work trip and dad's got to do the sleep routines or something like that. So we expect it to be better and stay better, but actually what happens is it gets better and then it drops down, and it gets better and it drops down. What we know about sleep interventions or sleep strategies is each time you need to go back and correct it, it's a little bit easier and it doesn't take as long. So it's okay. It's okay if you go back into co-sleeping because your child's sick for a few nights, you'll get it back. It's no drama at all. So I think most of that is just understanding what's ahead of you and not setting the expectation of it's going to be perfect quickly and it'll stay perfect forever. It'll go up and down, and that's okay because you'll just get it back.
Okay, because it's things like going on holidays, staying in another place, staying at Nana and Grandpa's. Like there could be other sleeping situations where it's harder to follow through with that.
Yeah, and it's managing your own expectations and panic about sleep going off track. I
Yeah.
think I feel such confidence in it'll come back on track because I've seen so many families have that pattern happen for them. But when you're in the middle of it, it can feel very distressing because you think, oh, I've done all that work and now sleep is off the rails again. But it'll come back. You just work on it again.
Okay, that's good to know. Now, some people are going to ask, is my child going to grow out of this? Is this going to, like, is sleep a problem for children? And eventually, I can see parents wishing that they have one of those teenagers that they can't get up in the morning. I mean, or is it just sometimes your sleep patterns will remain that way for the rest of your life?
Yeah, a little bit of both, I think. Sleep naturally changes over time developmentally as kids get older and they go through growth spurts and have different needs and levels of sleep. But there can be times where your child is perhaps more dysregulated and sleep is disrupted, or there's a growth spurt and sleep changes. So I think knowing that and preparing yourself mentally for that is important. Um, and what we said before about just go back and reestablish those patterns. But you can expect that if you work on sleep, that overall quality of sleep and amount of sleep will get better over time. And certainly, if you work on it really early, you're setting up those patterns for life. So, this time that we're talking about, these younger children and getting sleep right early on really, really helps you have a teenager that is going to sleep really well.
Yeah, okay. And sort of final question, this one's for Sammy, my neighbour. What gives you the most hope for families navigating these early sort of sleep struggles in little kids? What sort of gives you hope there? And what message of hope can we pass on to Sammy?
Yeah, poor Sammy. Mainly that it's teachable. You can change it. I feel absolute confidence in that, not because research tells me that, but because the stories of families that we've worked on this with tell me that. They come in and say, okay, it's getting better. It's been up and down, but it's getting better. The trend over the last 3 months is that we're having more nights of sleep. So I think, I hope that you'll leave with confidence that if sleep is not going well in your household, there is something that you can do about it. It's probably just getting yourself ready to do something about it and having the right people to support you.
Yeah, wonderful. That is lovely. And I hope we've given some families that are watching this today a bit of hope that a better day could be coming. Miss McKinnon, thank you so much for joining us today on the Ought to Know webinar.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Very nice. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. As I mentioned earlier, you will get a copy of this video in the next couple of days once my team get it online. Obviously, we encourage everybody to come to Autism Awareness's website where we have many, many resources available to you. Now, I'm happy to say in over 140 languages. That's a new feature we have. So by all means, come and have a look at those. This video of this webinar and other webinars that we run every month is available on Autism Awareness's YouTube channel. So come over there and have a little look at those videos. Again, I want to thank Leap In very much for their sponsorship of this webinar series. Without them, we wouldn't be here. So we're very, very grateful. So thank you to everybody. And I hope everybody gets a very, very good night's sleep tonight.
Yes, may sleep come easily to you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Bye, everybody.